Hello, my name is Junius Williams. I am the host for Everything's Political. And today our special guest is no stranger to politics. He is the 40th mayor of the city of Newark. Raz J. Baraka, his progressive approach to governing has won him accolades from grassroots organizations to the White House. With a forward-thinking agenda that reduced crime to its lowest levels in 5 decades, addressed affordability while maintaining steady growth, lowered unemployment, and returned local control to schools after more than 2 decades, Mayor Baraka has defied expectations since taking office in 2014. During this historic time, he is currently fighting for a myriad of social justice reforms while continuing to lead the city through the fight against COVID-19. And I'm glad to have him here today to talk about one of those social justice reforms, and that's called the Newark Community Museum and Conflict Resolution Center. How you doing, Mayor?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Glad to have you. Let's start with this question about the museum. Well, what impact did the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the calls for defund the police have on you as the mayor of the New Jersey's largest city?
Well, I just think that it created a moment for us to expedite some of the things that we were thinking about for some time. The atmosphere and the climate was good to push the programs that we thought needed to be done, and at that level, at that speed. And so we took advantage of it and made them happen during this time period. People began pushing for these things. It's only right to make it make it happen.
So you developed something called the Office of Violence Prevention. Let me give a little background to the people out there. People were saying around the country, some people anyway, we need to defund the police. And you said, no, we need the police. But what we can do is to make sure that the community is engaged in creating a climate of nonviolence. And to start with, you set up this Office for Violence Prevention. Can you talk about that?
Well, the idea of public safety doesn't belong to the police, and we've given it to them for too long in our community, and allowed them to have reign over whatever was public safety, whether they abused us, violated constitutional rights, they did whatever they did in the name of public safety, executed white supremacy, whatever they did under the name of public safety, and justified that to folks in our community because of the issues in our community of high violence, shooting, all of these things that go on in our neighborhoods that we know of. The over policing of our communities have been justified through those things, though nobody has really looked at the fact that while we've been over policing our communities for decades, we have not seen a consistent downturn in violence and crime because of that. We have not treated it in a holistic way as public health. And what this office does is gives the responsibility to community members, to organizations, to folks in the neighborhoods to help create a climate of public safety, an environment of public safety that is not just in a police officer's hands, so we can reduce the number of police officers that we actually need, so we can put a new idea in people's head that public safety comes from the development of our community and not from the presence of cops. And that's really what the fundamental idea around that is. And then we fund it with the dollars that would normally go to the police department, because, if you go in our community, if people don't see the police, they feel like they're not safe because they equate safety with police. So if I go to a community meeting, the argument it would be, I haven't seen a cop on my block in 2 days or 1 day or 24 hours, right? And they argue with you about wanting to see cops. If you were in a suburban neighborhood, if they saw the police, they would think it was a problem. I just saw the police in my community. Is everything okay? Right? So there's a complete difference of how the police are viewed and what their purpose is, right? We look at the police for safety. Those communities look at the police to solve incidents or problems that take place in their community. And there's a deep difference there.
So in addition to financing the Office of Violence Prevention from that 5% taken away from the police budget, you also said, well, we're going to have a museum. We're going to have a community museum. We're going to put it in the first precinct, which is where the actual home of the beginning of the Newark Rebellion in 1967. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I think, I think art is a weapon, and culture is important. And I think the museum helps people to get perspective, make a connection between what happened in 1967 and what's going on presently and everything that happened in between those two dates, right? In between 67 and George Floyd and this museum and what people in Newark have been doing. They haven't been sitting on their hands. There's been a lot of things going on in our community from the grassroots efforts. And I want people to be able to see that, relate to that. I want the kids to study it, look at it, and aid and assist them in understanding their city and then motivating them to begin doing something about furthering that change. And we picked the building there because I think it's appropriate, that was the building that's known for where police violence created a rebellion in our city. And so to switch that around is not only symbolic, but I think that emotionally that it almost brings a little closure to some of the stuff, that took place.
But why that particular precinct? Has that idea been received well in the community?
Well, I picked that precinct because that's where it began. Like you said, that's where it started. And I think that it's just like ubiquitous, that we turn that precinct into a place of community recovery as opposed to community repression. That we took those buildings and, like, when you seize power, you take the instruments that your enemies use to put you down and use those as instruments to lift you up. And that's the way I thought of it. So everybody in the community is not completely happy about it, obviously, because of what we said earlier, which is they think that the absence of police in their community is going to make their neighborhood that much more unsafe. And so we obviously going to have patrols and do everything that we've been doing in that neighborhood around the police side, and we're very conscious of that. But secondly, we have to get people to begin to have the faith and rely on themselves and our ability to solve some of these conflicts, to reduce violence, to create programming, to do the different things in these neighborhoods that helps us stabilize communities and reduce violence. We have to begin that somewhere. And, so that you're always going to be in the middle of that. And I always tell people the biggest people that you're never going to hear about that's going to come at you about this defund police are our grandmothers and aunties and so forth in our neighborhood and community who live in a city where they are being victimized or witnessing violence and trauma daily. Like that, it has to be addressed. If we don't address it, then it's really like we really running too far ahead of the people as opposed to running with them.
So your idea is to put the Office of Violence Prevention and the museum in the same building. How are they going to relate? How are they going to relate to each other?
Well, I just think that's the usefulness of that when people come in to that office to deal with trauma, to deal with conflict resolution, to deal with violence reduction. When youth come in there to try to be redirected, I think that it is not only appropriate, I think it's therapeutic for them to be able to see the pathway that the people before them went through in order to get to this point and give them some understanding of how they got in this situation. That they just weren't born bad and evil, that there's some things going on in their community that created this environment, and they're part of people who struggled against it. And they should join that as opposed to joining the Bloods.
Now, from what you've already said, I think it's fair to say that Newark stories will play a very important part in this museum and in that lesson plan you outlined.
Yes, sir. It has to be.
Any particular stories that you're interested in?
There's a lot of stories, man. I mean, just like some of the, even the anecdotes of what was going on in the Newark Rebellion and the reason why it started. I mean, some of the rent strikes and housing struggles and all of the things that took place in the city to let people know we just didn't lay down. that the projects didn't just appear and we took whatever people gave us. I mean, just the displacement of folks, hundreds of folks, thousands of folks in our city, how they got in them projects, what, and I think that will spark people to begin to think about how they even got there. Like, how did their family get there? Like, what was those buildings used for before we got in there? Were they built from the ground? Like what Terrell Homes, for example, what was that? Before we moved in there, right? And where did we live when we first migrated here? All of those things. I think it sparks people's interest, even if it sparks 3 or 4 people, to try to figure out their journey here and their struggle in this community. I think that it will be incredible.
You think young people will respond to that?
I think you turn the light on in anybody's head. The problem is trying to get the light on, and folks have difficulty doing that. And I think using the use of culture and art and all these are very, very, very proven tools to attract, engage people, to get them to turn that light on. All you got to do is do that. Once that's done, there's nothing you can do after that. When you first figured out that there's something larger going on, I mean, it's just nonstop appetite for getting more information and more opportunity.
And you come from a very prominent activist family, Amina Baraka and Amiri Baraka. Can you, when you were growing up in a kid in that household, what kind of stories did you hear?
I mean, I heard stories about the movement itself, about struggles between people in movement. I heard stories about the Newark Rebellion, of my mother running around the city trying to find out where my father was in the middle of the rebellion, having to call folks in Europe to, some of these famous white writers to get them to call into Newark to find out where he was. The only thing that would have, got them to talk to her about where her husband was at the time. My brother was born May 31st, 1967. So, just those stories, by themselves. And then my father, talking about how he got hit in the head. They pulled him over, hit him over the head. And the guy that hit him over the head was a student with him at Barringer High School. They went to school together there at Barringer High School, the cop there. And they said he had a bag of guns in the back of his back of his car. And they read his poem in court as proof that he was an insurrectionist. So he finally got that thrown out of there, but ultimately they convicted him of riot and everything else because of that poem.
I remember going to your house when you were just a little bitty little boy, see you running around. One thing I admired about the Baraka household is that they didn't try to keep y'all separate from what was going on. You obviously we weren't that interested, but you came downstairs sometimes you didn't come downstairs. And there was always somebody there of interest. I remember meeting Max Roach, the great drummer, Nina Simone, Aminata Moseka, the great jazz singer. Tell us a little bit more about that household.
Well, yeah, I mean, my mother and father, they had events, parties, meetings at the house all of the time. Later on developed into Kamako's Blues People in the basement where they did poetry and jazz and blues in the basement of our home. And so there were always writers and activists and artists and musicians throughout the house all of the time. And then sometimes it got really lively, at those parties with black beans and cornbread and collard greens and, all hours of the night, people getting up, dancing, preaching, singing, doing all kinds of things. So it was pretty interesting, as a kid, and your friends coming to check that out too. You come in from playing football in the street and you got a whole house full of people, to you at that time looking wild and strange and all kind of stuff going on, So that was, and I got the same people you saw. I got to see those folks growing up. You didn't know who they were really until you became an adult. You say, oh, wow, these people were in my house. I didn't know who these people were as a child, but, whether it was Mikey Pinero or Sekou Sundiata, like you said, Max Roach or Nina Simone, any of these people that been in the house. From Maya Angelou to all kind of folks. So
I remember that there was a piano not pushed up against the wall, but in the middle of the floor.
right.
And so whoever was there who could play the piano would sit down and play at that piano. And then other folks would join in singing or playing whatever instrument they brought at that time.
That's right. That's what they would do. Have a jam session right there.
Right there in the spot. And then later on, we graduated. I should, because I was invited sometime to come downstairs to Kamako's Blues Place, where we had poetry jams as well as music jams. And of course, everybody wanted to hear your father read poetry. And he always liked to do that with music.
Yeah.
So he had his music groups down there. What was the relationship with you and music growing up?
Well, WBGO played in our household all day long. Like you woke up in the morning, WBGO was playing. You go to sleep at night, WBGO was playing. I don't think they ever turned WBGO off. It played, and it was jazz and blues and Sarah Vaughan and Coltrane and Sun Ra and Bessie Smith. They played a lot of people. I don't know what the playlist is now that WBGO is like, but back then, boy, they used to get down. And besides that, my father and mother used to play the record. The record player we had a record player there. They played the
Right.
records and let them records play all day. So, I mean, music was all in our house all of the time.
I always thought that your father wished that he could have been, in addition to being a poet, writer, short stories, novels, whatever. I always thought your father wanted to be a musician more than anything else.
Yeah, pretty much. He loved Duke Ellington. He loved Sun Ra. I mean, he was even a music critic. So he played the horn before too when he was younger. Like he played the trumpet when he was younger. So I don't know if why he gave that up. So did I. In fact, in high school, I played the cornet, and I gave it up. So, but yeah.
So what is your favorite kind of music?
Wow. I mean, I listen to all kind of music, man. I mean, I can't help but to love Nina Simone and Curtis Mayfield and all of that from that time is just in me from growing up. I mean, those folks are on my playlist now. Nina, Curtis, Coltrane, Miles Davis. So what? I mean, all of that is on my playlist now. But also, I grew up in the city and was very influenced by hip hop. So, a lot of the old school hip hop artists, I listen to still, whether it's Run DMC or Eric B. and Rakim or Public Enemy. I still listen to those folks right now. And that was my childhood music, my high school music, and my college music that excited me into action and activity. It was like the theme music of the time. It was the motion picture in the background. So that's in me as well. So it's a kind of mixture of that kind of music that I like.
What about your mother? What role did she play in that milieu and in your life?
Well, my mother is the one who really told us most of those stories for the most part. My father would chime in, but my mother is the one who initiated that stuff, who, took care of our household, obviously raised the family there, who always, try to keep us focused on, the movement, people, humanity, all of those things, and she was the host of all of those things, all of those events and parties. She cooked the food, she sung, she danced, she read poetry, and she made sure we went to bed when it was time to go to bed. That we wasn't sneaking downstairs way past the hours that we were supposed to.
Right. Right. Yeah, I remember seeing some faces on the stairway kind of looking down.
Uh-huh.
Not necessarily because you had famous people, but because there was a whole lot of noise going on in that place.
That's exactly right. Whole lot of noise. Yep. And what I hated about it, brother, is when everybody left, we had to clean up that place.
Yeah, whether it was inside or in the backyard.
Yeah, we had to clean it up. That's right. My mother and us. Mother gathered us up. We got to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what role you talked about different kinds of music? What what was the influence you think of just being in the Baraka household and the family experience? How did that shape your desire to first of all want to be mayor, and then secondly, now that you are mayor, how does that shape your administration?
Oh yeah, I mean, just the love of community of people, the fight for justice, all of those things, and it has these things have different impacts and different effects on many people. I know many people's children who uh, grew up in the movement, part of the movement, it just had different effects on them. Some people, they ran away from it, they don't like it. I mean, it, and that is because it wasn't all just dancing and singing. There's also, police break people busting in our home. You don't get to enjoy the same things other kids get to enjoy. You got a funny name. You know what I mean. You don't celebrate the same holidays as everybody else. You're almost isolated. People treat you a certain way because of your father's politics and your mother's politics, all of that stuff. And the time for family is affected by all of that pressure that people put on your family is affected by that, without a shadow of a doubt. And just trying to understand that people purposefully, you have to, and I think it affected me to begin to study and read and understand why these things was happening, why they made a decision to be in the movement and do the things that have us at rallies and protests at 8 and 9 years old, right? Or why the police was bothering my father, or why they was, why sometimes when they talked, they had to turn up the music in the house to have a conversation, or, all these kinds of things was just for a child growing up. It's difficult, to understand in any environment. I think me personally, it helped me to begin to read and study and try to figure out what the heck was going on. And then having conversations with my mother when I was in college, I would always have conversations with my mother and help me read certain books, watch certain movies, listen to certain things, and help me come to the conclusion that this is something that I needed to be doing. And I think just the politics thing is simply, us protesting and marching and always winding up in front of City Hall, you know. And I was like, damn, it must be something in there. Why we always got to come down here? You know what I mean? Like, why do we protest and stay in front of City Hall? Like, what are we coming down here for? And, maybe there's something there we need to get. And I mean, just that like basic notion made me feel like we need to go do this. And, once I ran, I lost, I kept doing it because I think once I did it, I felt like I could do it, and we stayed in it until we actually won something. And, now that you're here, you realize even that the things that you were fighting for are a lot more complex than you even could imagine. And that your enemies are a lot more dangerous than you could even thought of. Right. And so the kind of strategy and other things that you need to do this is more than just a Friday night 6 o'clock meeting. You know what I mean? It is a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that you have to just engage in to at least get some of the stuff done you want to get done and push this thing just a little bit further towards democracy. And that's what we try to do. And it's difficult because you have thousands of people that work with you, and all of them don't believe what you believe. And that's fundamental. Like when you in here, that's one of the fundamental contradictions. Like at the end of the day, you're trying to get people even to do stuff that they don't fully accept. And so you're not just fighting with the powers that be out there that trying to prevent that. You're fighting with your own folks to say this is something that we should do.
That brings up two memories. When Ken Gibson got elected, the police on the chatterbox talked about him like he was a dog, but he signed their checks every day.
Every day.
Every day. Finally, I guess he got them to realize he wasn't so bad, but he also got some more police in here because at that time, the city was about 95% white police, and
that's right.
About 95% of that 95% lived somewhere else. So that was a royal change in the guard, so to speak. You didn't have to worry about that, though, did you?
Well, actually, when I came, we were still in that situation. We were 95%. That's like absurd, right? But the majority was still not black and brown. folks. I think what changed was, Corey had to lay off 162, 160 something police officers because of the budget problem. Cory Booker. So when I came, I had the ability when we started fixing this budget issue to hire police officers. So we hired 500 cops since I've been here, and now the police department is almost 80% black and brown, and 22% women. And people don't talk about that around the country, but I think that has a lot to do with some of the stuff why it's easier to make some of these changes, and they're not police officers that are from out of off Mars. These are black and brown police officers whose families have some relationship, or they still live here in the city of Newark.
How does your growing up experience, how does that affect your conception of the museum that we've been talking about in the Baraka household and growing up in the time that you did?
Well, in my house, there was books everywhere. So, you go to the bathroom, there's books in the bathroom, books in the music room, books everywhere. Now, you can't walk anywhere in the house and not see books, monuments, statues, pictures of my father with John Coltrane, a poem from Langston Hughes, right? All this stuff, these are artifacts. And you could just sit in there and look at some of that stuff that he brought from, and my mother brought from all over the country, all over the world. When they travel, they bring stuff back, and that has a impact on you whether you know it or not. You grow up in that environment. I mean, even by osmosis, you're gonna get some of that stuff, right? So, the understanding of the relationship of art and development and culture and academia is important, right? I understand that, and the worth of art and understand that while we try to uplift it in the city, because we know that at the basis that art helps people congregate, make people come. It's not just for social development, it's also for economic development. And I understand that. And so that's why we talk about and use art the way we do. But also, just the time period I grew up in, and, all the activism that I was involved in as a child, as a young person, makes me understand the importance of it, because I look at it like, what activated me? Like, what made me feel like this is something, I should do, right? Because everybody didn't take the path that I took. And there are a lot of people, like I said, I know a lot of people's children, because we know people's children because they was at our household, right? And sometimes we all got to play together, and we grew up in the movement together. So, that other people took different paths. And I understand. I decided that activism is something that I should be involved in, and because of that, I understand the usefulness of it.
How about your siblings? Are they as oriented in the same way as you?
I think for the most part, like in one way or another, I don't think that we don't come to the conclusions on the same things all the time, but at the end of the day, I think for the most part, they understand that we need to move forward. Like, we need to struggle, and then somebody get, we got to get out of this situation, and I think that depending on their age and the time that they grew up and what was going on in our family, it affected them in a different way. Like, whether you talk about my older sisters or my brother Obalaji or someone, what was going on. My brother was born in turmoil. My oldest brother was born in the middle of turmoil. Newark Rebellion. My mother was like, he was a baby. And he grew up in that time, when all of that was going on. The Committee for Unified Newark was happening. All that stuff was going on. He was born 1967. I was born 2 years after that, right before King Gibson's election. I was a baby when they was organizing the campaign for King Gibson and pulling together this Black Puerto Rican convention. So I think time period affect, how the impact it had on the different children in our household, definitely. And what was going on with my mother and father and their relationship and the city and all this other stuff.
Now, I want to salute you for what I found out about recently. You are building something called Kawaida Towers.
Yeah.
And Kawaida was one of those things that your father really wanted to do. We don't have time to go into all of it, but the the powers that be conspired to make that not happen, and you very quietly put that back on the agenda.
Yep, very quietly. The and it's not about, my mother always talks about, like, she's like having an issue with the work with Kawaida, because what the memories that it elicits for her. You know what I mean? Just Milana Karanga, the movement of the time, the craziness that was going on, of the time, the issues that she had with him and in the movement itself with Committee for Unified Newark, all of that. And it brings issues like that up, and very valid and poignant issues that need to be addressed. And she's a different person today than she was in 1967, 68, 70, when this stuff was going on, 70, 71, all this time. So her political views are a lot different than this. So the word Kawaida just elicits so much. And so it's more about what happened, that they were fighting for housing in this community, and they refused, and they really used the power of white supremacy to prevent this building from being built, to divide the community, to target individuals, to take tax abatements away from people, to deny people affordable housing. And they did all of these things, with the help of elected officials. Well, with their silence, with their fear, with their backing away, with their reversal. I mean, the council voted for the tax abatement, then voted to rescind it. That hasn't happened like that since then. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I think that it should stand. I think it should stand, and it's a part of us telling our story.
Absolutely. I remember that. I remember that turmoil. I know what your mother feels, but there's a whole different generation now. People say, okay, Kawita, that's just another one of those names that he uses. So,
Yeah, it's the struggle, the fight, the momentum of that time. Where were we at, and what was going on? And our kids need to know the good and the bad, right?
mm-hmm.
They need to figure out what's happening on their own. Sometimes we try to protect people from something and we drive them right into it. And so we just need to point it out and say this is what it is and be honest about it. And Kawaida Towers, they would not let us build it. We seized power. Now we're going to build it.
So where are the artifacts going to come from for the Newark Community Museum? And we have a very fine.
I was hoping you can help us out with that, Junius. I'm sure.
I'm on the case. I'm on the case.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people out here who even have stuff in their household, man, that they could lend to this. And I mean, there are a lot of. I mean, I've already been, like, even when we did Kawita, I started getting videos and pictures and all kind of stuff that people send you, that they just got. Look, this is what I had since then, a flyer, all kind of things that they have up.
Okay.
I mean, Rasasi got like a zillion pictures, man. You don't know this guy. He's been around since Methuselah taking pictures, so he's got them.
I don't know what he does with all those pictures. He must have a whole place where he just stacks 50 years worth of 50 years worth of photos there. But yeah, that's great. Yeah, hold on to those pictures.
Yeah.
We're gonna use them. I am going to see. This is just a sidebar, y'all out there in podcast land. I'm going to see the people who have kept Bernice Bass's tapes.
Huh.
Bernice Bass was the first Black radio female journalist that we had, and she interviewed people from Malcolm X to local folks to you name it. She was there, and we're going to try to get some of those tapes, digitize them because they're on reel to reel. We're going to digitize those and put those in the museum so folks can hear what she was talking about. You remember her, don't you?
Yeah. That should be good.
Quite a powerful lady.
We need all of that stuff, man. I think that those tapes, if we have tapes or artifacts from the Black and Puerto Rican Convention, man, if we have Hilda Hidalgo and all of the stuff that she was saying, all those people, they I think people need to hear their voices and the things they were saying.
Right.
These people today that call themselves activists, elected officials, all these things, people should hear this stuff so we can see what these people were actually trying to do. Because sometimes I think we got the wrong idea in our head about what was supposed to happen.
Yep. Yep. So, all right, folks out there, you hear it. If you got anything at all, get in touch with me. I'm not going to put it on the mail to get that. Get in touch with me, and we're going to see what we can do about memorializing your bequest to the museum. We almost finished here, man. I appreciate the time. When will the museum be open? I understand you have a date of July 12th to launch the public information campaign about this.
Yep.
Why July 12th?
Well, wow, we pushed. We started having meetings about the office and what it's supposed to do. We're going to continue to have those meetings. We want to push the obviously the museum and the importance of that. And July, Stevie Wonder said, "Hotter than July, brother." That's the that's the song. I mean, July is when this thing jumps off, when it jumped off around here. So I think that all things happen for a reason, brother.
Well, I appreciate your time. This has been Everything's Political, and I'm very glad to have been hosting this series now of 8 podcasts. This is the end of our first series, and so I want to thank some folks who have been working with me. Alexis McCoy, our logistics coordinator, Kelly Prempe, editor, Frankie Walls, social media coordinator, Kalina Berryman, kind of filling in as everything, calling her a consultant, Anthony Ant Jackson, who lives in Las Vegas, Nevada, but formerly from Newark, who did the original music that you hear. My own son, Che Williams, sound engineering and technical assistance. Also, thank you to the Terrell Foundation and the Center for Education and Juvenile Justice for sponsoring it. So getting back to you, Mayor, thank you for being the cleanup hitter, so to speak. We're going to be back in September with more episodes. If you don't see me around, just remember that a black man's work is never done. Let the choir say amen. Thank you. Bye-bye.